Hello and Happy New Year. It's time to bid farewell to the first decade of the 21st century and to embrace the year 2020. During the past year, China withstood the pressure on multiple fronts as strategic challenges emerged both at home and abroad. As President Xi Jinping illustrated in his New Year's speech, China has a far-reaching vision for 2020 and beyond. So how to assess China's 2019 achievements? What should rank atop China's list of priorities for the coming year? And how should China engage with and shape the framework of global governance? To discuss all of these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the Beijing studio by Su Ge, Chairman of the China Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, and He Weiwen, a Senior Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. We are also happy to be joined via satellite by Pavel Fagenhor, a Russian defense analyst in Moscow. That's our topic. This is the Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue. We've just watched the annual New Year's address by President Xi Jinping. What are the most impressive points for you?
Oh, just now I think everybody was impressed with President Xi Jinping's New Year address. So far as I'm concerned, I thought this is a very encouraging and also a speech with far-reaching significance. It's very comprehensive. It's also very concrete and down to earth. For instance, it touches the past, reviews the present, and also predicts the future. Basically, it covers domestic situation, how this country has fared in the past year, and also it also touches upon international relations, probably with more coverage of domestic situation. I'm impressed. There are several points. For instance, President Xi Jinping says that China is entering the 2020. Next year, it's very encouraging because China is going to elevate all poverty. So that's a very significant achievement. During President Xi Jinping's speech, he talks about the achievements made during the past year. For instance, in science, technology, in agriculture, in industry, and in society, and so on. And then for the China's foreign relations, President Xi Jinping said that more countries have established diplomatic relations with China. Now we have established diplomatic relations with 180 countries. We have friends all over the world. He also listed the fact that China in the last year held the second Belt and Road Initiative, the conference, the Import Expo, and so on. And then the message is very clear to the outside. China is going to remain open to the outside world. And then we are going to continue to make further progress and join hands with other countries in promoting the community, world community with the shared future. So that's very encouraging.
Ambassador Su Ge said correctly that everyone was impressed, but perhaps with the different feelings and for different reasons, for the domestic audience in particular. Weiwen, do you find anything particular for you when you review what we went through in the past year?
Oh yes, of course. I should say that year 2019 will be remembered for many years ahead, because this is really a landmark year. We just celebrated the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. We achieved so much. I was extremely excited when President Xi Jinping mentioned two landmark figures. First, this year, our total GDP will get close to 100 trillion renminbi yuan. This is a landmark.
Amazing. That's 2/3 of the total of the U.S. GDP.
Oh, yes. And also the per capita GDP. will break 10,000 US dollars. That means that China...
That's the future tense, not the...
Oh, no, over 2019.
Over
so,
2019?
Yes, because 2019 we still have a few hours to go. So you cannot say we finished the year.
Okay.
Okay, but the year, the figure is set. That our per capita GDP will certainly break $10,000, that two landmarks. But also President Xi Jinping not only mentioned these figures, he said he visited many places during the year, especially he talked with the grassroots people in the poor areas. And he said next year we'll eradicate poverty, 100%. So nobody should be left behind. Our growth, our development is for all the people, not just for a few people. And we will hit moderately prosperous society by 2020, next year. That's also for all the people, not for just a few people. So I feel very excited, and I feel quite warm.
Let me cross over to Pavel Fagohor, the Russian guest speaker who's standing by in Moscow. Hello, Pavel. I'm not sure if you have followed the New Year address by our President, Mr. Xi Jinping, but looking back, what can you tell us about what China went through, and what are the particular things that you think you should elaborate a little bit more so that the rest of the world could follow and could understand easily about China?
China right now is developing, continuing to develop, and very successfully, in a very unpredictable and dangerous world that's around us. And there are tensions growing in the Asia-Pacific region, and right now in particular around Korea once again, and that concerns China very much. In the Middle East, there are Americans and pro-Iranian Shia, Iraqi, Kataib, Hezbollah shooting at each other with deadly consequences. And all these conflicts have the potential of escalating. So internal development is very important for China. Outside security is a very big challenge. It's a very challenging world, and where China should work with and is working with other nations to keep a lid on the conflicts that have a very serious potential. And of course, there are also trade conflicts, and there's a lot of danger in the world where China has to not only survive but prosper.
China and Russia join hands and get a lot of jobs done and impress the whole world. One of them, I'm afraid, is how to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the diplomatic relationship between the former Soviet Union, for which Russia is, of course, the biggest inheritor, and the PRC. So why do you think President Putin and President Xi Jinping exchanged greetings about the new year at this particular moment when we are about to say goodbye to the first decade of the 21st century? Pavel?
Well, yes, well, China and Russia right now are not just simply partners, they're very close partners. I would say that China and Russia are standing kind of back to back, helping each other in this unpredictable world in which they find themselves in trade conflicts and in political conflicts. There were just several days ago, there were joint Chinese, Russian, Iranian naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman, because of course the Gulf is very important, and very important for China, because China gets a large portion of its crude oil from the Gulf, and without that there would be very serious problems within China. So working together, not as allies per se, but as very, very close and trusted partners, and supporting each other, keeping the stability in former Soviet Central Asia and in general in Asia, and facing out to the unpredictable outside world. It helps China and helps Russia. They are kind of compensating each other in different fields.
Yes, indeed. President Xi Jinping said in his policy speech in Cairo I remember, that China doesn't seek to have a sphere of influence or seek to stage proxy wars in any parts of the world. Now let's come back to examine our domestic politics and economics. Look, both of you have examined our avowed goal of completely eradicating poverty, despite the impressive figure, according to the World Bank, that China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty. That's, of course, tremendous contributions that we made to mankind, yes, to the whole world. So what do you think of the 5G telecommunication infrastructure, our moon landing, supercomputer project, mega project, and all of these have caused consternation from the American side, and hence perhaps they decided to launch preemptively the trade war, and that is only perhaps the tip of the whole iceberg, considering the structural contradictions and geopolitical rivalry between these two biggest economies. So Ambassador Su, why do you think Americans in particular feel scared about the remarkable progress we have made in scientific research?
Well, that's a very good question, because we are now in a world. We are now in a world in which we are experiencing a drastic change, big transformation, not experienced probably in a century. That being said, the United States has been taking the lead for several decades. Now, when China just now, at the beginning, you said that China's GDP has reached the point of about 2/3, probably 66% of the total of the United States. That's why the one which has been taking the lead feels great anxiety. And then when it looks at the world, it sees that the former dominance is no longer there. So when we look at the situation in the world, we say that in the world there is a group of developing countries and new economies which are on the rise. Now, which used to be the situation that the one or two superpowers used to dominate the world affairs. Then it was G7. Nowadays, probably G20 is playing a much larger role. So that being said, I would say that the United States, when it passes this national security strategy report, lists China together with Russia, with Korea, and with Iran. So the basic mentality has changed. So I don't think that 5G is that simple. So when U.S. sees this, it sees from the viewpoint of national security. But in my opinion, the technology serves the purpose for the betterment of all human society. So if you keep on, we should build more interconnectivity rather than setting up more walls. In that way, the world would indeed become one world, two systems.
A lot of media reports from the West have said clearly that the phase one trade agreement between the United States and China is likely to be signed within a few days next month in January. And they said Vice Premier Liu He would have the Chinese delegation and sign the agreement. Now, having said this, we are studying very closely the dynamics in sustaining the Chinese economy, given the adversity of the downward economic pressure. Why do you think President Xi Jinping spoke of the Grand Bay Area integration, the rejuvenation of the Changjiang River Delta region, as well as the coordinated development between Hebei, Tianjin, and Beijing?
Yes. I think that really we are facing an increasing downward pressure. If we look back, the growth rate of China over the past 20 years, in the year 1998, Premier Zhu Rongji said we should try our best to keep our growth rate at 8%. So at that time, our notion was any growth rate below 8% will be a big problem. Then 10 years later, after the financial crisis. Then our notion was any growth rate below 7% would be a big problem. Now we are under 7, it's okay. Then we are facing a growth rate of below 6%. So how shall we deal with that? We should keep our growth for decades because we are still very poor. A developing country, we want to make a better life for all our people. So we have to keep growth from quantity to quality, high quality growth driven by high technology, higher end manufacturing. For this purpose, we should find a new way, that is, find the growing points by clusters of big cities. Great Bay Areas will become a new engine driving our economy forward, and the Yangtze River Delta and the Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei will also be among them. Of course, we should mention the middle range of Yangtze River and also the Chengdu, Chongqing area. All those will serve as new engines for China's sustainable economic growth.
Let me go back to Pavel. Pavel, what do you think of the sustainability of the Chinese economy in the year 2020? And do you think our economic growth is likely to be undermined and compromised due to elections in some of the countries, such as the United States? Because no one denies that the two biggest economies live in the shadow of the trade war, and phase 2 of the trade war, I'm afraid, will be more related to high technology, and particularly the 5G telecommunication competition, allegedly vying for digital leadership in the world. What do you think?
The trade war between America and China is potentially crippling the world trade and world economic growth. Yes, right now apparently there will be some kind of deal, and that's of course very good. But the basic problem do not go away. There's a lot of enmity towards China inside the United States that's bipartisan. And also there's the growing tendency of protectionism, and not only in the United States, but in other parts of the world. There are sanctions issued almost on a daily basis, which also cripple and undermine free trade and economic growth. There's a building up crisis. It's economic, but it's also political, and as it happened before in world history, may have military repercussions. Dealing with that, no country on its own can deal with these challenges. There should be joint action and joint understanding is lacking. There is, but there's not enough, clearly not enough, and it does not involve all parties. And of course there's also the very serious problem of instability inside the United States. And the United States is the motor to a large extent of the world economy, its financial system, the world financial system. And the instability, political instability inside the United States is a very serious challenge. It's very hard, and it's not easy for any country, even as big and rich as China, to deal with that and kind of stabilize the situation. So working together and working patiently together is very important. And will China and Russia find the way together? It's important for other nations to also join in this process to stabilize what's happening, and so that economic growth can continue.
A defense analyst, Pavel, can you brief us on your thoughts about the remarkable achievement of Mr. Xi Jinping since he took office some 6 years ago as the chairman of the Central Military Commission? We are talking about the rapid modernization of the PLA armed forces, and we were able to build the first aircraft carrier, and that carrier is put into operation. It has been put into service, active service. What do you think of, say, the global implications of having pretty advanced and modern PLA armed force? Will that be a force that provides the world with public services and products instead of being viewed by some of the competitors as a geopolitical competitor, if not a threat to their national security.
Well, Chinese military are developing at an amazing pace. China is building more naval ships than anyone in the world right now. It's moving from a brown water navy of the old right now to a so-called green water navy, and then apparently already to a blue water navy. China has more warships right now in operation than the United States, though of course the United States has more displacement weight. The American ships are bigger, but China is catching up, and catching up in submarines where it still has things to do, and building aircraft carriers. Of course, they are still not yet fully operational compared to what the United States has, and China apparently does not want to challenge the United States to fight, I don't know, like in the Second World War, Japan to fight the Americans out in the Pacific. China doesn't have such ambitions. But the development of the Chinese Navy, it's of course a stabilizing factor in the Asia-Pacific region. China is now projecting force into the Indian Ocean, and that's also helps stabilize the situation there. But there are challenges, and there's going to be a lot of misunderstanding of Chinese intentions and tensions, and so there's also a lot of diplomatic work. Building up a military capability should go hand in hand with increased diplomatic efforts to build up understanding with different nations.
There's no question that the PLA armed forces stand ready to defend our core interests and stakes. Look at the upcoming elections in both Taiwan region and the renegade province of the PRC and the general elections in the United States. Do you believe the Taiwan Strait, South China Sea, are likely to become the target for those hawks in the Pentagon? And therefore, what do you think should be the response by our PLA, by the Chinese military to defend our core national interest? Because in the island of Taiwan, the pro-secession political force of DPP is likely to win, according to some of the sources of information. And they don't recognize the One China principle. They refuse to accept Taiwan as part of China. So in that case, do you think as a very important part of the mission of PLA, we are ready, whatever happens?
Well, the PLA has capabilities, I mean, uncomparable to what, say, the previous very serious crisis that happened in '96 in the Straits of Taiwan, when it was clear that the Americans ruled the waves. Now it's very different. The PLA is a deterrent force there and can really challenge, if need be, the American fleet, if need be. Though I believe that, of course, all sides will try to avoid going into any kind of real confrontation. It's going to be a game of deterrence. In the Asia-Pacific region right now, most likely the most dangerous thing is the unpredictable nature of the North Korean regime and the problems in the Korean Peninsula, where military action can happen with much more probability than in the Straits of Taiwan, where I hope that there's going to be just standoffs without any kind of real action.
Thank you very much, Pavel, for being with us. Ambassador Su and Mr. He, China, of course, doesn't want to be viewed as yet another a copy of the former Soviet Union posing a threat to peace and development of the world. Our BRI aims to create dividends of globalization instead of delivering a parallel market, if you look at the issue of 5G. So when we review what's going to happen next in the year 2020, what do you think are the most important priorities on the agenda of the Chinese authorities?
Well, when you look at President Xi Jinping's New Year message, he clearly laid out China's future plans. China is going to continue to embrace the road of peace and development. They're going to continue to make friends with other countries and peoples all over the world. And President Xi did mention BRI, as you did just now. I think BRI, that's just China's contribution to globalization, to interconnectivity between continents, between countries, regions, and peoples. But in our world, it's a very complicated one. Some people view this from a different angle or with stained glasses. They say, well, this is another Marshall Plan. China is grabbing more strategic political influence and so on. But actually, when you look at China's partners in the Belt and Road Initiative, you can see that through Chinese efforts with all China's partnerships, the economic pies are being enlarged. So this is a mutually beneficial project.
When we examine the future and what the future might hold for China's development and our integration with the rest of the world, one issue captures headlines. For example, Europeans and Americans share the same values across the Atlantic Ocean. However, in terms of their own individual interests, we see growing discrepancies and disputes between the two sides. In this case, do you foresee a return to the Cold War? How can we minimize or mitigate the negative impact of the trade war? What can we do together with South Korea, Japan, and European Union economically?
Okay, the possibility of Cold War. I think Cold War is a possibility, but it's not a realistic possibility. It's a possibility in theory, in mentality. Some hawks at the Pentagon and the White House are pushing that. Because why? It's not a realistic possibility, because the whole world is linked. The globalization is an economic law. Nobody can change it. And on the basis of that, we see that the connection between China and the United States is based on the billions of dollars trade and investment. How can you break it? And as far as the European Union and China is concerned, European Union has a larger trade in the world than the United States. And importance, of course, they share the same value, of course, but they don't share the same strategic goal. The United States wants to see the hegemony of the world. The European Union does not.
For example, in defending multilateralism,
yes,
as opposed to unilateralism.
And the Europeans, the future of the European Union, because all the EU countries are not very large, they're small, not the continental countries, smaller countries, but very strong, very developed. So the future of their economic growth lies in the globalization and also lies in cooperation with Asia. You see that United States, although it is launching trade wars everywhere, it accounts only less than 11% of total world trade. While Europe and Asia combined account for 70% of total global trade. So if Asia and Europe link together and we have free trade, we support the multilateralism, then we'll have a safer world. And we should not regard the United States as always bad. It also has another aspect, seeking cooperation with China.
Thank you so much. Despite the growing geopolitical mistrust and rivalry between Washington and Beijing, a summit meeting was just concluded in Chengdu, where Premier Li Keqiang met with his South Korean and Japanese counterparts. And next year, President Xi Jinping is likely to visit our neighboring country of Japan to further advance regional integration so that we would share benefits and dividends of regional integration. With that, we conclude the last edition of 2019. And we look into the future along with you in great expectations. Thank you so much for being with us. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.